Story 3, the River Mersey and its significance. That's a beautiful view of the river. It would be brilliant to gaze at the river from the observatory at Catalyst, but that might not be possible in the short term. Hopefully, a bit further away, you can bring your children there and take a good look around and see just what's going on. Encourage children to observe the river, for instance, from the promenades, and to think about just why water and the river are and have been so important in Halton. They could maybe put some of their answers on whiteboards or post-its or whatever. Just collect them and have a think. So water, H2O, elements hydrogen and oxygen. And here's some answers I've come up with. Bringing and taking stuff. The river formed a boundary, and it still does, though we cross it really easily. Making ships, making sails. So shipbuilding and sailing and all the things associated. And on those ships or boats, bringing and taking people. Fishing from the banks and from boats. Water for drinking. Maybe a bit dodgy at sometimes. Washing us and our stuff. And, oh dear, carrying nasty stuff away. Let's take a look. The river's been a barrier. Mersey apparently means boundary river. And the river has separated the Viking Danelaw to the north, Widnes, which was part of Northumbria, a vast area, from Mercia to the south. So Runcorn was in Mercia. And Mercia was ruled from 911 by Queen Ethelflaed, a powerful queen who prevailed over the Danelaw and was the daughter of King Alfred, Alfred the Great. The remains of a castle have apparently been found when the railway bridge, the Britannia Bridge over the Mersey, was being built. So Runcorn Railway Bridge, the Britannia Bridge, is also called Ethelflaed Bridge. And it's got castellated turrets and that shield on it to represent Queen Ethelflaed. The languages spoken on the opposite sides of the river would have been different. Danish in Widnes and Anglo-Saxon in Runcorn. And it's interesting to think how the people would have viewed one another. Maybe some hostility there. Now, there are very many Viking place names in Lancashire now. Widnes is a Viking place name, apparently, and it's said in early Danish to mean wide nose. And the rugby team is Widnes Vikings. Let's take a look. If we just rotate the map, we get that. The Runcorn region of Cheshire's got fewer Viking place names, but there's several BY or places nearby, for instance, Helsby. The River Mersey was the boundary between Lancashire and Cheshire from the time of the Normans till 1974, when Widnes joined Cheshire. And that's a Mersey flat. Our part of the river's challenging to navigate because of the sandbanks. It's shallow and there are powerful tides. So boats like this, Mersey flats, were devised to cope with the shallow water. They sailed from Runcorn, where a lot of them were built, and out to sea. And much of the material that's part of our story will have been carried in them. There were flats on the canals and on the Weaver navigation. On the Weaver navigation, they were called Weaver flats, and on the Bridgewater Canal too. That's a picture, a photograph of some of those flat boats. That's the Runcorn town crest that we've mentioned in part 1. So I won't go through all of the detail about the symbolism on it now, apart from waves for water, red for the chemical industry, the sandstone, the ships, and Navem Mercibus Implere, which means fill the ships with goods. And here are some of the ships. Those are at Western Point, and we've met the Mersey flat. Now, there has been a ferry crossing the Mersey across Runcorn Gap since soon after the Norman conquest, and it continued until the Runcorn Railway Bridge was finished in 1868, and that had a pedestrian walkway, so people could walk home at the end of a day in the other town. During Queen Victoria's reign, the crossing on the Mersey ferry was so bad that there were complaints in the Times newspaper about it and about the very grumpy ferryman who operated it. The crossing was dangerous. There were those tides. Getting onto the boats across slippery stones and mud was dangerous. Maybe just take a look at what the river banks are like and what the stones are like now. They're covered in algae. And the boats were rotten and leaky, and they often didn't run on time, and occasionally they ran aground or drifted way down the river because of the powerful currents. In Across the Gap, Jean Morris points this out and explains, maybe think about why those poor ferrymen were so bad-tempered. They had to walk themselves over those slippy stones and sail a lot of the day in those leaky boats. They carried the passengers very often to the boats on their backs, and the heavy goods that they, like pianos apparently, that they could carry. And they were paid a pittance. So it must have been one of the nastiest jobs in history. This story is also relevant to story 9 about transport. So thinking about the horrors of the ferry journey makes the value of the bridges really clear. And this lovely image is of the transporter bridge floodlit at night as a celebration. The transporter bridge carried people and maybe the odd car in a cage below. And there are likely to be people in the local community who might reminisce about this. And on the Halton Heritage website, there's someone's oral history about taking a journey in that too. Now, the Mersey was once an important source of food, with fishing as a youthful pastime along its length. Snigs, which were eels, were common and sold in pies at the ferry boat inn. That was also known as the Snig Pie Inn. It's now the Mersey Hotel, known as the Snig. The slipway to the ferry is near the transporter bridge, or the remains of it. So the slipway to the ferry was just here. That was the transporter bridge. And people might have used water from the streams that flow into the river for bathing. But when the chemical industry arrived, or soon after it arrived, that Snig Pie had to stop because the river became one of the most polluted in the world and the fish died. Legislation from the 1970s onwards has led to the river becoming more and more clean and healthy, and you can see herons catch eels. There's still problems, there's still microplastics, so more's needed. But in terms of recovery, the story's really good. Tourists came to Runcorn in the late 1700s. It was a bathing place and spa. And this image is of Belvedere Terrace. There was also Clarence Terrace. They were built about 1830 to employ some of the tourists who came, to accommodate them, probably for salt baths rather than bathing in the river. But across the river in Woodend, which is now West Bank, wealthy young people sailed yachts. There weren't many baths in houses, least of the ordinary people before 1900. So it's thought, you can see a link in the teacher's pack, that some people who lived near the river probably took an occasional swim or wash in it. As the pollution increased, that too would have become more smelly and a bit more grim. The river has, well, probably always carried nasty stuff away. It flows to the sea. And when there was just a small population living alongside it in the villages, the wee and the poo of the people and their cows probably didn't harm the river too much. But as the population grew, it became more of a problem. There were night soilmen who used to go to houses and collect the wee and the poo in buckets and sell it for farmers to put on their fields to fertilise them. Quite a nice circular idea, but maybe not great for infection. But during the 19th century, fertilisers were imported from abroad, and the farmers didn't want the wee and the poo anymore. So for many years, it was put onto boats and taken down the river or the ship canal and dumped in the Mersey estuary. Way back in 1848, the bad state of the estuary was already being commented on, but that continued for another 100 years. And some of the older residents of Halton will remember just how much waste used to go in the river from industries and how dirty it was and what it was like, which makes its present state seem even more outstanding. The Mersey Basin campaign won the worldwide prize for river cleanup in 1999. There's been recent news of otters. That photo isn't a local otter, it's one from somewhere else in England. But there's been news of otters, which is just fantastic. There are fish in the river. And fortunately, the Shell Green plant in Widnes now deals with sewage sludge from across the northwest and turns it into soil conditioner. Nice cyclic economy. We can't be complacent though, because the Mersey's got some of the highest incidence of microplastics in the world. Maybe this is the breakup of stuff in the river that's been in there for years. Is it getting in from our houses? What can be done to stop this? We need lots of environmental chemists for the future to keep not just the Mersey clean and to get rid of the plastic waste, but to work out what to do with it and to help polluted rivers all around the world. So STEM and chemistry can really help with an important future. And yeah, classes might like to look at the work of the Mersey Gateway Environmental Trust, which is doing a lot to look at the local environment, at the river, at the health of it, and the health of the ecosystem, the health of everybody surrounding it too.